Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ashikin and I will be your MC for today. Welcome to this expert series themed Circular Economy, Making a Sustainable Difference. We have invited representatives from Embassy of Hungary, Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization, Energy Institute, Greenergy Asia, Energy Studies Institute, and National University of Singapore Center for Nature-Based Climate Solutions to provide a good in-depth discussion on circular economy. Just some housekeeping rules before we begin the session. We will start with the presentation and answer questions after the panel discussion. All your mics will be kept on mute, so please use the chat box and share with us your questions, if any, and we will answer them after the panel discussion. Else, you may also use the raise hand function and we will unmute you to ask the questions. Appreciate if you could keep your questions short and sweet, and do direct it to a panelist. Thank you. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Kavita Gandhi, Executive Director of SEAS, to say a few words. Kavita, please.
Thank you, Shikin. Good afternoon, Your Excellency Judith Pach, our distinguished speakers and guests. On behalf of the Sustainable Energy Association of Singapore, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to each one of you to this expert series webinar. Over the last 18 months, when we could not connect, we could not meet in person, we have tried to connect with our members and keep them informed and engaged through these expert series webinars, and we've had a great response to that. At SEAS, we have various committees focusing on energy efficiency, clean energy, sustainable infrastructure, as well as working groups on energy storage, marine renewables, as well as carbon. So today's webinar is being organized under the auspices of our Sustainable Infrastructure Committee, which is chaired by Dr. Sanjay Kutan. The theme that cuts across all our various committees and working groups is the same, which is emission reduction using various technologies, solutions, and business models. That's the aim and goal of all the work that we do at SEAS. In today's expert series, we will take a deep dive into various aspects of this very important topic of circular economy, and I would not like to belabor over it because we have all the experts here to talk about that. Our invited speakers today are all leading voices on this topic, and I thank each one of you for your mind share and for being here today with us to spend this time. This was a topic that stood out very clearly when we did a white paper on accelerating the decarbonization of Singapore economy. We deliberated over it a lot, and it finally had a chapter in our white paper that SEAS published in 2019. You're most welcome to have a look at that white paper. It's on our website and everybody can download it free of charge and study it and give us your inputs. I'm also very grateful to you, Ambassador Judith Pach from Embassy of Hungary, for joining us today to share some of the best practices and developments from your country. I really hope that we can create many such opportunities for collaboration with Hungary as we all go forward with very similar agendas towards sustainability and the sustainable development goals. So with that, I hope that all of you, our participants today, will have a wonderful, fruitful session. I'm sure with our distinguished speakers, you will get much more understanding and insights into various aspects of a truly circular economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kavita. Now, I would like to invite Her Excellency, Ms. Judith Pach, Ambassador Designate of Hungary to Singapore, to present on Hungary's transition towards a green and circular economy, best practices from Hungary. Your Excellency, please.
Sorry, you're on mute. Sorry, Ambassador, you are on mute. Actually, we can't hear you.
Yes,
there you
right
go.
now I'm back.
There you go.
Thank you so much. It has a little bit of a problem with the remote control and everything, but now I'm here. So thank you so much, Kavita, and a very good afternoon to everyone. It's an honor and pleasure for me to be here today, especially since I have to tell you honestly and start with that this is my first official, so to say, presentation as the ambassador of Hungary to Singapore. And it's especially close to my heart because sustainability is a very important topic to me and personally as well, but also for the Hungarian government, this has been something which has been on the agenda for a very, very long time. And I think this is right now also from a political and governmental perspective, something which is very, very timely and which we definitely need to discuss. And I'm happy to share with you right now what we are doing in Hungary and what is the general perception here about circular economy and sustainable development in Central Europe and how we view these issues. So today I would like to share with you some thoughts about circular economy in Hungary, about the energy mix and how it is right now, how we have the mix in the renewable energy and what are the challenges in this regard when we are looking into this region. Also, I want to show you some of the government action plans, what we are actually doing, what are the policies, how can we help to really enhance the efforts of companies as well, but also of the private sector and also of the population. I will speak a bit how the companies are viewing this, how the companies in Central Europe are adopting to the changes, how they view the views of the circular economy and how they can adapt. And I will also share with you a bit about the big upcoming event, which we are very happy to host, the Planet Budapest, which will be a huge sustainability summit and expo, which will be organized by Hungary. So without further ado, let me continue a bit. So when it comes to the benefits of circular economy, I think in this regard, I don't need to tell this group a lot about it. But what it means for Hungary, that in 2018, we established the business platform of circular economy, which was a very, very great step. And it encompasses companies, organizations, and institutions, which are very keen on sharing the experiences, because that's also important, and also to introduce very good practices to the communities and also to other business players in the sector. What we expect from a circular economy approach and development is the growth and jobs with up to 7% of GDP growth. That's according to the EU Commission calculations, so that's an EU number. We also expect savings of up to 600 euro billions. It's also calculated by the Commission, and improving the supply competitiveness and security. Also, we think that with circular economy, there is a significantly improvement of global economic and environmental resilience, which I think it's very, very clear to say. And of course, it's very much encouraging innovation, because of course, in order to transition from a linear economy to circular economy, we definitely need to embrace innovative technologies and innovative approaches. So in order for this transitioning to happen fully, we will definitely need innovation in line. And of course, circular economy, which is very important when it comes to climate change, is also about the reduction of greenhouse gases, which I think is also very important nowadays as we see how much climate change is affecting us. Yep, there we go. Let us look right now. I think we moved a little bit too fast. Could you please help me to move back, because I think the remote is a little bit moving very slowly. Okay. Yeah, so for us, what is very important is when we look at, I want to go back to the slide. I don't know if you can help me. Maybe it's better if I give the remote control back, because it's not really working. If we can go back to the energy mix. Yes, that's it. Thank you so much. One more forth to the energy mix. That's it. Thank you. So when we look at the national energy mix of Hungary, you see that we have a huge proportion which is nuclear. It is because Hungary has a nuclear power plant and which is also right now under extension. So right now, most of the conventional electricity generation comes from our nuclear power plant, which is mainly nearly 50%, now 49.3% of our energy mix. And from coal, we only have 8.5%. And the natural gas is also contributing to nearly a quarter of our energy mix. For us, nuclear energy is a key element because it's also cost effective, it's safe, and it's stable in the energy mix. And it's also is to meet climate mitigation goals. So that's very important for us, and it's a very stable source of our energy. Renewable energy is produced and dominated in Hungary by biomass and also by the solar energy. Right now, we have a huge supporting scheme in Hungary, which is supporting the building and the enlargement of solar power plants. And we have a very special subsidies price scheme for enlarging these kinds of solar plants. And we plan that by 2030, we will double the size of solar power plants and the use of solar energy in Hungary. So with this, we hope to raise this amount. When it comes to biomass, it's also very important in our energy mix because in Hungary, we see that there are perfect conditions to that due to the developed agriculture and also because of the natural resources and so on. But it has its limitations because in some cases, it conflicts the food sector's interests. So that's why when it comes to renewable, Hungary places the emphasis on solar instead of biomass. When it comes to wind energy, we have some wind energy supplies, but it's really because Hungary is geographically located in the Carpathian Basin. There is no relevant potential. We have some at the border close to Austria, but we realize that this is really not an efficient way to produce renewable energy. And in order to use renewable energy, it's not only the purpose to really just say that we have renewable energy, but it's also to have it efficiently and that it's efficiently supporting the energy sector as such. Hydropower, we face the same difficulties that there are no suitable rivers in Hungary and also in the region. It's very hard. There are some small scale hydro plants, but this is not really a reliable source of energy. So when it comes to renewable in this region, in Hungary, we are focusing on solar. And that's why also on the government side, we are putting very much emphasis to support that and to double the size of solar power plants. If we can go to the next slide. I don't know who has the control. Yeah. So when we look at what the government can do, first of all, and what we are doing is that, first of all, it's not only the legislation is one point, but you also need to have a very clear structure when it comes to energy sufficiency and how to transition to circular economy. And in order for this, we need a very good planning and a very good oversight. So for this, we have an integrated state secretary for energy and climate policy, who is only responsible for that. And he's working at a very timely and very good Ministry of Innovation and Technology. So he is especially responsible for only this sector and for only this task. And he has a very wide range of legal and also governmental actions and plans which can support him in that. We have also a very strong legislative framework for the transformation of the energy system in which we have very clear guidelines and very clear regulations in order how we can meet by 2050 climate neutrality target, which we have set for Hungary. We also have the adoption of a new national energy strategy and the national energy and climate plan, which is very clearly focusing on the time between 2030 and 2040. because when we are speaking of sustainability, that's not something which we can regulate for the next years or the next 5 years. Here we need to speak of a longer time span, and that's why we decided to already put up a very detailed plan, which is detailing the actions in Hungary up to 2040, but also up to 2050, so that we have a clear view on how we want to achieve our targets. When it comes to energy policy, of course, this is not only a domestic issue, and you see also my own ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, put it on our agenda, but also on our international policy and in foreign policy making. This is very important. So also at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, we have a government commissioner who's responsible for sustainability, and we have a ministerial commissioner for energy security. Because this is nowadays, this is not something, a topic which is only important domestically, but also internationally, and we can learn from each other. When it comes to the actual government action plans, what we are doing, which is like more, this was the framework and the legislative part, and now comes the actions, what we really make out of it, is that we adopted the Climate and Nature Action Plan, which is right now, we spoke of the long-term plans in the beginning. Now we are speaking of the actual action plans, what we are doing, what are the exact programs and parts, what we want to achieve. We also put up the Circular Economic Nonprofit Ltd, which were established to supervise the regional waste management system. Because of course it's good and a nice thing to have the big plans and the government goals and regulations, but you really need to go down to the regional level and to the grassroots level to see how these things are implemented. We have begun to eliminate illegal landfills, which is still an issue here in this region, that we still have some illegal landfills, and also the recycling of waste causes still a challenge. So this was a very big step that we eliminated to the illegal landfills, which are still present. We prohibit the distribution of certain disposable plastics, and we encourage companies to do packaging much more wisely, much more sustainably. And these kinds of regulations definitely encourage such a movement. We also expect multinational companies to use environmental friendly technologies. This is also supported by several government incentives and also by tax incentives and so on, that the companies are really ensured that it's not only a wishful thinking, but it's also something which is supported by the government. We plant 1 million trees a year, which is definitely something very, very important, and to also keep our biodiversity. Hungary has several national parks, a very, very strong, large biodiversity in the Carpathian Basin, and we want to ensure that this stays as it is, and that industrialization and also the lot of investment which is coming to Hungary and the largening of the manufacturing sector is not happening to harm this natural habitat. We will double the capacity of solar plants, as I already mentioned. That's very, very important for us. And we support the appearance and the use of low-cost electric vehicles. This is also on the company basis, but also for every household use. And there are several incentives which are helping that. For example, which is a very big issue in Budapest, you can park for free if you have an electronic vehicle. And that's very important because the situation right now in the capital is very hard and parking costs a lot. So this is just one example which will also show that and hopefully result in more people using electronic vehicles. We have introduced the Green Government Bond, which is also to finance these initiatives. And the government adopted the Renewable Energy Support Scheme that provides significant resources for renewable energy generation through tender applications. So these are the tenders which I spoke about that are helping for the companies to really invest into such technologies. And if we go to the next slide. Yep, here are the primary objectives of Hungary Energy and Climate Strategy to strengthen energy independency. And here I will speak about some of the actual programs. because our main 4 focus points is first that for us, the consumers are in focus, especially as an elected government. For us, the people are very, very important. And we also believe that when it comes to circular economy, we need to target the people, and we need to know that they are on board and that they understand why this is important. Our second main focus point is to further strengthening the security of supply, which is also very important for us, especially in this region. The third point is the climate-friendly transition of the energy sector. And the fourth is the promoting of innovation and economic development, because this goes hand in hand with circular economy. So if we can look at special programs which we are having in the next slide. Here we have that when the first point, when we place Hungarian consumers in the focus, what this means. This means at the first point that we keep energy prices affordable for customers. This is very important because I don't know how it is in Singapore, but in Hungary, for example, for a household, the energy prices are considered very, very high, and it's a big proportion of their monthly wages. So we introduced an energy efficiency obligation scheme to stimulate customers' energy saving, which is very, very important. I believe I won't mention here all the projects which we have. It's just for you to have an outlook. And as you see, the orange marked projects are the priority proposals, and the green ones are those ones which are already in progress and already show positive results. On the second point, when it comes to consumers, and we support local decentralized renewable energy source production and self-consumption, which means that we promote renewable energy utilization in households, and we support local renewable energy-based investment. This means that, for example, in the past couple of years, there has been more and more households which installed solar panels, which installed special heating systems and so on, which are also helping to achieve much more energy efficiency. The third point here is to empower consumers to choose and control their consumption, which is also very important. And I can mention here the smart metering program in the electricity and gas sector, and also to equip households connected to district heating with heat cost allocators marking their consumption, and also the digitalization of the supply system. I'm not sure how much you're aware, but heating, especially here in Central Europe, where we have very cold winters, and right now already here, still in September, we started to put the heating on, and this definitely uses a lot of energy, and to do this wisely and sustainably is very, very important. When we go to the second focus point is also the strengthening of our energy supply sector is important, because we need to decrease the dependency on and also by increasing local renewable energy production. So this is very important here. It is the fine-tuning of the successful hydrocarbon and geothermal concession system. And also when we speak about the second point is strengthen the integration of the regional electricity and gas markets, continue gas diversification to reach the Black Sea reserves. These are some very, very regional but very important things for us that we can achieve that, and to guarantee the security of the supply and the stable functioning. I won't go into, because this is very much energy politics, how in the Carpathian Basin we have the gas consumption and how we can get to that. But it's very important for the countries here, not only for Hungary, but as we see in the table, we have cooperations with Slovakia, Slovenia, Romania. It's important that we have this independency. When we go to the implementation of climate-friendly transition of our energy sector, there we see that we put great emphasis to decarbonize the electricity sector, to support the reduction of energy consumption by innovative solutions, and to make district heating greener and more competitive. As mentioned, this is a huge project which we are very, very keen to achieve. And if we go to the next slide, then here it is what we will take it, what other effects we do in order to support innovation in combating climate change is that we support innovations in the energy sector. By, for example, what can you do here is the elaboration and implementation of innovative pilot projects. Our government has been very, very active in the recent years to support and also with several incentives and several tenders to support innovative pilot projects which show up innovations in the energy sector. We also implemented the second national climate change strategy. We will implement the green transport program, which is very, very important. And we implemented the green bus program throughout in big villages, which are big cities, also in big villages, but definitely in big cities around Hungary, which shows already very positive signs. And we enable SMEs and companies to go green. Here I already mentioned some of the incentives which we have, but we are here also fine-tuning the energy efficiency investment related to corporate tax advantage. And when you think with the heads of company executives, if you need to pay less taxes, but you need to go green, then you would definitely have a very, very strong motivation to go green. And we also create opportunities for economic development provided by the adaptation to climate change. So here we have some water management projects and like the Western Balkan Green Fund, which is also helping these incentives. And if we go further, I try to speed up a bit, is that when we go on the company level, why this is good for companies. I already mentioned that we have definitely also from the company side, there is a positive attitude, but there are also state directives and incentives which are helping them to do so. And we see that more and more companies in Central Europe are investing in green and sustainable technologies. We see that they are using more renewable energies. And right now, 2/3 of the companies which were surveyed in a special survey already installed renewable energy sources. Companies consider modernization of heating system and building efficiency very, very highly. And this is one of the main things which are happening right now. Also, to change their fleet to electric vehicles is very important. And especially in the agriculture and electricity sectors, they plan to install the largest share of renewable energy capacities. Solar panels I already mentioned. So if we go further, I will give you just 2 more examples of one of the biggest companies. If we can go to the next slide. You see MOL is one of the regionally the biggest oil and gas listed company in Central Europe, and it's a Hungarian national company. And especially as an oil and gas company, for them, it was very important to also do the transition, and they introduced the Shape Tomorrow strategy, which is setting carbon reduction targets and aiming to make a new solution and technologies profitable for the company. So I think MOL did here a very great thing, and they are definitely setting an example. And they, especially as a big company, will reduce the group level emission by 30% by 2030 and achieve net zero operation by 2050. Which is very much also setting the example on the company level. And to bring you one example on Singaporean and Hungarian cooperation, Singaporean Keppel Infrastructure invested in 2019 in the Hungarian-owned integrated European energy company, Met Group, for a 20% stake, because they believed that they wanted to enter the European energy market. And it was this company which had strategically the most aligned views with Keppel Infrastructure in this regard. So I hope that we will have more and more cooperation in this field as well. And just for last but not least, let me tell you a bit about Planet Budapest, which I mentioned, which is a huge sustainability expo and summit, one of a kind, which will be organized in Hungary on the 29th of November up until the 5th of December. And if we go to the next slide, you see the main objectives of Planet Budapest. It's very much an expo focusing on sustainability, and it will showcase on the expo side, it will showcase companies and strategies and innovations from Hungary and the Visegrad countries, which is here from the region. But it has also showing a wide range of innovative and competitive solutions that can be integrated into everyday life. It's a huge summit targeting on policymakers, companies, but also on the actual consumers and actual people, how we can make our lives on every level more sustainable, focusing on water management, transport, food production, energy and waste management, and smart cities. And why this is worth to participate and why I mentioned this, I know that right now it's hard to travel and COVID still causes us a little bit of a heartache in this regard. But most of the panel discussions will be also streamed online, and the whole discussion and summit can be also followed online. And I hope that I can count on some of you to participate as well and to see it, because I'm sure it will be a very interesting program with a lot of heads of state, high-ranking official, international organizations, but also a lot of NGOs from all around the world and organizations which will share their good experiences. And we are very, very proud that Hungary is to be hosting this event. So I think I hope I gave you a little bit of a way of thinking how the Hungarian government and how Hungary in general views the issue of circular economy. And again, thank you so much for your attention, and thank you for having me today.
Right. Thank you, Your Excellency. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Peter Godfrey, Managing Director, APEC from Energy Institute, to present on circular economy, making a sustainable difference. Mr. Godfrey, please.
Well, good afternoon all, and I recognize that the time is slipping by, so I'm going to be as quick as I can in terms of my presentation today. So let me just make sure that I can get the remote control to work, which I can. And the first and fundamental point I'd like to make is that the circular economy is not just about energy and climate policy. It's not just about recycling. It's about a lot more than that. It's about a set of principles aimed at fundamentally re-engineering the way we make, use, and return the resources for reuse where we can throughout our lives and throughout our planet. And I think it's very important to recognize what the circular economy actually needs to do if we are going to move it at all into being in the future. And let me start off by saying that resource efficiency, not energy efficiency, is at the heart of the circular economy. It's about how we decouple the use of resources from our economic wealth and well-being. And this is an important fact that is very often overlooked. If you look at the statistics, you will find that if we look at extractive resources, so that's metals, that's energy resources, that's everything that we take out of the ground, we extract something like about 100 billion tons a year. That's about 13 tons of material per person per year on this planet. We cannot continue in this vein. And therefore, we have to find a way for resources to be effectively and more efficiently in the future. But let me also add that out of all of those resources we extract, 80% of those resources are consumed by just 15% of the global population. So this is not just an issue about how we take out the resources. It's also about how we balance our resources and our resource efficiency and effectively more in the future. And before we move on, it's worth mentioning just some of the underlying principles of the circular economy. As I say, it's not just about recycling. It's about basically designing the whole way we manufacture, use, and then potentially reuse our resources in the future. All of you will have seen a version of this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit more details. But let's just talk about resources and resource effectiveness in the most simple sense of the word. And this is what politicians, this is what organizations, this is what individuals need to consider. On the one hand, we produce and distribute our resources. We have to find better ways of sourcing them more effectively in a more circular friendly way. We have to find a way to design things more effectively and sustainably. We have to find ways of creating more efficient use of those resources. And where possible, we have to use those resources more as a service rather than a product that has a life, because obviously that's a great way of improving things. And the example that everybody knows is that when we buy a car, if we look at the average amount of time a car spends in the garage, it's 90% plus of the time. Why are we all buying cars when actually having a service providing us those cars and therefore creating a more efficient and effective utilization of those cars would be a much more sensible way to go? So there's a lot we can do on the production and distribution side. And there's also a lot we can do on the consumption side. We can begin to start looking at ways of not only recycling from manufacturing and consumption, but improving our capabilities of refurbishing, remanufacturing, upcycling our business, looking at different ways of reusing and redistributing products, and of course, different ways of creating more effective ways of managing the system. So suddenly we begin to start seeing that the circular economy is just more than two words, and it requires a lot of work to be done in order to make it work. What we also recognize in this world of sustainability, and this we will have all seen in one form or another as the strategic development goals of the United Nations, where we're trying to find a way of balancing how people, planet, and profit can all be linked together, is we're beginning to discover that there are different ways to look at our ecosystems, that energy, food, water, waste all come together in different ways of looking at our ecosystems. And some of the work that I've done in this area has actually developed this particular picture here, which begins to show some of those ecosystems and what they look at. We're looking at different ways of managing our society, different ways of measuring what quality of life and how we manage quality of life should be done, different ways of managing the environment, different ways indeed of running government, economies, and of course, mobility. And what's interesting, coming back to Judith's points, and Judith was mainly focused in her presentation on energy, or quite largely, is that even the energy system is obviously beginning to start looking at new ecosystems. And this is a very complicated slide, so don't look at the detail. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the energy companies of the past are in their own way mutating into different ecosystems of the future. Every single energy company is looking at new ecosystems. Some of them are staying in the extractive business. Others are moving out into renewables and the more electrical side of the business, the power side of the business. Transportation is mutating. The way we build is mutating. The way manufacturing is mutating. But the importance here is the emergence of new ecosystems. And that's what policymakers, organizations, and individuals need to think about when we say, where are we going from here? And this summarizes some of the work that I've been doing here in Singapore on the subject, when we start looking at how do we translate those wonderful theories that I'm sure you're all nodding your head and saying, this is great stuff. How do we translate that into policies? Okay. And these are the things you need to begin to start thinking about, because believe you me, not only Europe, not only the United States, but here in Singapore, we are all going to end up having to deal with these taxes and with these overheads that will begin to start helping to create those new ecosystems on the futures. Yes, there will be a tax on the use of virgin materials and resources when we can use reused wood materials. Why shouldn't there be? That usually goes hand in hand with recycling. So that obviously encourages the reuse of materials and discourages the use of virgin materials when we don't need to. Yes, we will see end of product life policies and policies that will make producers responsible for product stewardship schemes going forwards. So some will have to take back their products and do something with them. They won't be allowed to go back into landfills and waste going forwards. Green procurement, which Kavita mentioned, is one area we've already touched on, and Singapore is already looking at from a government perspective. We will begin to start seeing policies that will say we want to procure green products, not non-green products. And non-green products will get taxed more and more and be less and less welcome in our society and countries. And within that terms, obviously the way we design and use our products will also change. And then underpinning of all of that will be the reinforcement of eco-labeling, standards, and mechanisms that will underpin those policy prerogatives at the top. So the point I want to make here is those are real things, those are tangible things. And I would say to every individual, every organization, and every government entity that listening to this argument, if you are not looking at the boxes on this graph sufficiently, on this slide sufficiently, it's about better time you did, because that is what is going to happen everywhere in this world today. Now, what also will happen, and this is where it's very interesting because you're beginning to start hearing people talk about more local supply chains after the pandemic, supply chain resilience, is that all of those policies will lead to different trade flows. We're all going to use products and manufacture products in different ways. And within the context of that slide that I have just shown now, we'll begin to start looking at different ways of managing global versus local supply chains within the context of resilience. We're going to be looking at different ways of creating and amplifying waste and scrap from recovery. Singapore has already started that with electronic goods, and it will continue down that path to make more and more products more recoverable. But it's not only going to be Singapore, it'll also become a regional issue, because we'll begin to start looking at supply chains from a more localized, regionalized perspective. Why move stuff thousands around the world, miles around the world when we don't need to? Also, secondary raw materials will become a booming market in the future. If you believe in virgin products being taxed, as I said before, then clearly secondary raw materials is probably a great business to invest in today. And I think increasingly it will be seen to be a very important area for a country like Singapore to be getting into that sort of area, especially as a trading hub and a trading center. The market for second-hand goods, reusable goods, will also go up tremendously and will become much more focused and routine. The trade in goods for refurbishment and remanufacturing will also increase and create new supply chains. And of course, within the context of all that will be a whole set of new services and service lines that could fall into place. So, in simple terms, that is the hard side of the circular economy. That is what is going to happen in Singapore and elsewhere in the world today. And what I'd like to leave you with, because I haven't got time to go into any details, you can use your phone and have a look at that, underpinning this, is an initiative that His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales has started called the Terra Carta Initiative, that basically takes all of these concepts of saying that actually the circular economy is more than just about climate change. It's about biodiversity. It's about dealing with all of these issues in different ways. And he's come up with this 10-point action plan, which I believe needs greater support, because underpinning all of that will be the very issues that he has raised in this 10-point action plan. Now, I've gone through my slides really quickly. I hope that's enough to be getting on with, but I hope you will all look at that and ponder what you as individuals should really be doing when it comes to the circular economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Sorry, thank you, Peter. I don't know why I keep addressing you by your surname. I also like to thank Her Excellency Judith Path for describing an ambition of a nation to make it a greener economy. And I'm sure we will all be inspired to take a leaf from that roadmap. And we wish Hungary all the very best. And I also like to thank Peter for really outlining both the complexity of the circular economy, but also where actionable items are actually very doable if there is political will and consumers are behind the politicians, which is so aptly described by the work that Hungary is doing. We've got a great lineup of speakers today. And I guess the reason why this committee decided that we wanted to discuss circular economy is really part of the go forward equation, because when we look at all our initiatives around clean energy, energy efficiency, they're all parts of a greater system of system solution. And I think in the white paper that Peter and I were part of, the idea of resource efficiency is the overarching ambition. And if we keep that front and center, then we really look at system level solutions. And on that point, I'd like to just start off with Prof. Koh Lian Pin, who's director of the Center of Nature-Based Climate Solutions. And I just want to draw in Prof. Koh in terms of at the system of systems level, and nature is the biggest of which. How do you see its role in contributing to the effectiveness of policies that drive the circular economy forward?
Thanks very much, Sanjay, for that question. And before I answer that question, I also like to take the opportunity to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to be here today, and also for Ambassador Park and Mr. Godfrey for the excellent presentations earlier as well. So coming back to your question, Sanjay, nature I think is hugely important and fundamentally important because it underpins many or if not all of the services that we enjoy as the human species, including, of course, contributing to our food security. We must not forget that even in our modern agricultural practices, we still depend a lot on pollinators to ensure that we can sustain and maintain our productivity in many of the crops that we produce and that we consume. And another example is an issue that is very close to my heart, which is how we could leverage nature to address climate change impacts, especially climate change mitigation. In that nature is also the one that has been helping to maintain the balance of the biogeochemical processes on the planet for much longer than that humans have been here, and so we depend on them to continue to sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, in effect reversing what we humans have been doing since the Industrial Revolution in terms of emitting carbon, as well as storing and locking those carbon up in the vegetation material and keeping them in the material and also underground. So all of these are very important ecosystem services that nature provides, and they underpin many of the services that we enjoy, and also it's fundamental to the circular economy and many of the processes and systems within the circular economy that we are talking about today.
Thank you, Prof. Koh. And you know, when you said pollinators, it brought me back to this Disney movie called, I think it was called Bees. And when the bee population was wiped out, the whole world kind of suffered. And, you know, of course, it had a happy ending and the bees got together again and pollinated the world. But we forget how delicate the balance of nature is, and I think all our anthropogenic activities can influence. And I think when I talk about insects, I think I'm going to draw in Shiva now. Shiv does a lot of work with insects, but I think he's also been consulting around circular economy. And I just want to draw on Shiv's experience working with organizations. What is it that prevents them to think through the benefits of the circular economy and moving forward?
Thanks so much, Sanjay. Wonderful to be here. Lovely insights from the ambassador and from Peter. Thanks for having me over. So thanks for the question, Sanjay. In general, the most, how shall I put it, common reason that I've seen as a barrier to the transition to a circular economy is not actually intention. I think everyone speaks the right words. Everyone wants to transition to a circular economy. Organizations, large, small, governments, everyone says moving to a circular economy is desirable. I think fundamentally they don't know how, because their infrastructure, their tools, their systems are not designed and built for a circular economy. In fact, the most common example I give is even large FMCG companies or food and beverage companies are fundamentally not against the circular economy. Let's say if I'm a shampoo maker and seller, my problem is that after that shampoo bottle leaves my warehouse, I have no way of tracking it. It's not that I'm a bad guy and I want my shampoo bottle to end up in a landfill or in the ocean. So I think there's significant layer of traceability and what we call in circular economy nutrient awareness that we need to plug into the entire global infrastructure, Sanjay. That to me is the single biggest, I think, enabler of this transition to circular economy, especially large organizations. How can we help them track their materials? And in circular economy, we call them nutrients, technical nutrients, biological nutrients. How can we help them track those nutrients through the system? Once you track them, you have a much better chance of closing the loop around them.
Thanks, Shiv. I think there's an important point that you bring up, that prior to the concept of circular economy, a lot of systems were built without thinking through about the integration, be it water, energy, resources. You just built them according to your manufacturing plan, and you didn't consider what you would do to the waste. And on many resources, just not on building materials, but from energy and water. And we all know that the largest waste in energy is actually heat. So much is lost as heat. And on that point, I want to draw Prof. Lee in, because he's an expert in managing heat. And yes, there are a lot of technologies today that is trying to recover heat because of, and you see in combined cycle generation turbines and, the trigens and things like that. But there's still a lot of heat loss. And, you're being an innovator in the space. How far do you think out before we can actually capture all the heat loss? Or is this really a lost cause when it comes to heat management?
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay. First, I'd like to show my appreciation to CIS for inviting me to this event, as well as the excellent talk given by Her Excellency, as well as Peter, and as well as my fellow panelists. So despite the large quantities of industrial waste heat, most of them actually exist in the low temperature range, like between 40 to 200 degrees Celsius. And waste heat recovery has been limited to medium to high waste heat sources due to economic and technological feasibility. I'd like to use the example of an organic ranking cycle So ORC system operates with significantly lower waste heat temperature, sometimes as low as 70 degrees Celsius, as at least demonstrated in a lab environment by using organic fluids. Yeah, but I think they still have this long payback period issue, right? So for example, the ORC system typically have a payback period of about 5 to 6 years. So some of the industries expecting payback period as short as 2 years. So such investment then to them are not economically viable. So I think the challenge remains to improve the thermodynamic performance as well as the competitiveness of various waste heat recovery technology. But I thought the angle to look at is really to focus on the concept of circular economy, right? So instead of actually putting in place expensive equipment to sort of look into converting waste heat into, for example, electrical energies or power, the other policy is really look into, for example, co-location of industry, right? For example, if let's suppose you have an industry whose processes actually generate certain temperature waste. If you were to co-locate it, for example, with a food industry, then instead of actually going through an energy conversion process, you can basically just reuse the waste heat, right? For example, for sort of various heat processes, right? Including laundry, as well as, for example, dishwashing, things like that. Yeah. So I think circular economy actually has a lot of potential, right, in the areas of waste heat reuse.
Sanjay, just adding to that PSI, you know, I just wanted to add to it on the cool side as well. I mean, again, I think this conversation, and I think I agree with PS totally, you know, about COES location. You know, we're an LNG center here in Singapore. LNG is very cold. You know, why aren't we co-locating refrigeration plants and LNG plants? We actually need CO2 to basically store food as well as create fizzy drinks. So why aren't we creating them nearer sources of CO2 production where we're producing them? So again, you know, refinery, petrochemicals plants. So this concept of co-location is fundamental, I think, to the way we think going forwards.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's just a function of when we started designing and developing industrial parks left, right, and center. The notion of cooperation from a resource wasn't front and center those days, and I think it is becoming more obvious when if you start with a blank check or green field, that you start looking at integration. And I think the big example we have in Singapore is the district cooling system that is happening at Tengah, where you're kind of now leveraging because it's a greenfield site. So therefore you can get most of it. And I'm sure there'll be more example sites. That the challenge would remain that if you already had built the infrastructure, then how do you kind of incorporate circular economy equation into that? We have a question. I want to go back to Peter on another question that PS touched on payback period. But before I go to you, Peter, I just want to circle back to Prof. Koh. There's a question from the audience about biomimicry and the lessons from nature and biomimicry, specific reference to the circular economy. Any thoughts around that notion in terms of the way forward when we start re-looking at the way we structure our societies?
Yeah, so biomimicry is quite a broad concept. It just simply means, well, what it suggests, mimicking or copying nature, you know, be it the certain design elements or processes or patterns and so on. So there are many different fields where biomimicry has been adopted as an approach to try to learn from nature and to adopt or adapt some of the design elements. I think in terms of climate solutions, well, the one that is very obvious is what I was describing earlier, which is to essentially incorporate and leverage nature in terms of how it is already a very efficient system of capturing and storing carbon, which is what we need. So in some sense, some of the technological solutions to capturing carbon are ways of mimicking the process of photosynthesis. Of course, technologically different, but the outcome is the same, is to try to capture carbon and store it away somewhere. But in other fields like architecture and engineering and design, there are also other examples of biomimicry.
Thanks for that, Prof. Koh. Now, Peter, you know, PS brought up this point about payback periods, and I'm going back to you, Peter, because you're looking at policies, and there must be a balance between getting commercial payback period and the need to decarbonize our society to address climate change. And do you think policies are going to be written in a way that we need to rethink of just the financial aspects of solutions, but also the environmental aspects, and that should take precedence at some point?
Yeah, well, it's a really good question, and I guess we're a month away from COP26, so that will give us some of the answers, I suspect, in terms of how much global policy as well as local policy will begin to start playing into this. But the bottom line is, if you agree that what we are effectively doing, whether we talk about climate change or biodiversity or any of these others, is we're fundamentally trying to re-engineer a number of value chains that were in existence historically that are not right for the new technologies and the new world that we live in, all right? That does not come for free. And we can't just switch one switch off and switch another switch on, right? So at the end of the day, governments are going to have to put some money on the table to encourage that change to happen. Now, therefore, what is the solution to that? The first solution is governments don't like putting the money on the table for too long. So there's got to be short-term gains, medium-term gains, and KPIs in terms of the direction of travel being right, okay? And then, of course, there's got to be, as PS mentioned, the fact that if you spend money on research and development, the opportunity that as technologies develop and scale up, of course, those unit costs of technologies will come down. So costs just like wind power or solar have reduced substantially and will continue to reduce substantially. I suspect geothermal will be in the same boat. Asia has anything to do about it over the next few years. So, but it does need encouragement. And I think that's what we need to persuade governments we need to do. So how that encouragement comes about, whether it's through subsidy, whether it's by subsidy and tax, carrot and stick, are all some of the policy issues that we need to discuss. But what I will say, and this is the final point that I make, is that, and this is something that I don't think Singapore really has spoken enough about when it comes to voluntary markets and carbon markets, is there needs to be a value chain focus on how those markets are created. I don't believe the price of carbon or the price of change in one supply chain is going to be the price of change in another supply chain. So effectively, what you actually need to do is to be very value chain focused in order to re-engineer those value chains. Now, how we do that, I think, is the core question.
Thanks for that, Peter. I mean, it lends to the idea of the what do we do with the money we collect from carbon tax, right? And can that be a mechanism to encourage the adoption of technologies ahead of financial returns, but more for environmental returns? And I just want to swing back now to Shiv. I mean, when you talk to your customers about the financial returns on adopting circular economy types of solutions, would they be open? What's your sensing? Would they be open to it can't be everyone gets subsidies, right? There must be some pain from every part of the consumer plane, you know what I'm trying to say? I mean, so how much are they willing to meet halfway to address a existential issue? I mean, we're not just changing for fun. We're changing because we believe it's an existential issue. So what is the sensing that, it's 2 years is their ideal, but how far back are they willing to go if it's an existential issue? Have you had those kind of discussions when you're trying to convince them to come around?
Great question. Absolutely, Sanjay. Now, I'll just take a step back and mention that on paper, in theory, the circular economy should reduce your waste and therefore save money. It is like the energy efficiency discussions from the last decade. Hey, there's money left on the table, so let's, you're sort of leaving money on the table, so capture it. Now, then, economists came and said, no, not all of that money is economically viable. It's cheaper to leave some of that money on the table. It's more efficient, right? So we have similar discussions in the circular economy as well. The wave of innovation is just starting, and the ideal situation is if circular economy innovators can go to the big companies and offer solutions that can actually help them save money. That would be in the true spirit of the circular economy, Sanjay. That said, there are definitely challenges. I spoke about traceability as an example. In the food and agri-tech sector, traceability solutions currently that exist on blockchains and all those things are adding 8-10% to the cost of the supply chain. That's ridiculous. Anything more than 1.5-2% kills the economics completely. So I think the onus is on innovators to actually bring the costs down and deliver optimal solutions. I think the knowledge is out there. It's about engineering, integrating the ideas and offering them as concrete solutions to clients. Government can help, but I actually don't think the stick approach of taxes would work in the transition to a circular economy. I think in the context of climate, maybe those arguments are stronger, but in the context of the transition to a circular economy, we also have to demonstrate viability beyond the SDGs and saving the planet, I think.
Yeah, thanks for that, Shiva. And I just want to push back on that idea, because if it's an existential issue, time is not on our side. So if, how low a cost is low cost enough for everyone to start investing? I agree that the innovators will have their job cut out for them, but at some point we need to lower the GHG burden on the environment. So we may have to start, deploying technologies that may not have a immediate return, but we don't start somewhere and we're waiting for that perfect cost point that everyone is going to be rich and happy. We may not have a world to live in, so we need to strike a better balance than just the cost of change. And okay, Peter, you got your hands waving.
Yeah, Sanjay, I'd like to come back to you and Shiva on this, because I think there's one element that I think we really are missing. And I pressed the rewind button on a conversation that I only had last week with a very senior manager in a very large mining company who's doing quite a lot of work on the circular economy. And, they're doing energy efficiency. They're trying to decarbonize the way they mine their minerals, not in oil and gas, actually in the minerals business. But the weakness, and it comes back to the value chain in their strategy today, is they still make their profits by how many tons or how many molecules of their extractive resource they sell. That extractor has no responsibility for how those resources get utilized or recycled within the process. So to me, the one big legislative stick that is missing is those in the upstream side of a business must have at least residual responsibility for the whole value chain. And likewise, those that use the resources must have responsibility for the upstream. And that, to me, is the fundamental piece of regulatory focus we need to see from the world, is that joined up writing is the name of the game. And we don't have people who are digging stuff out of the ground, who can do what they like in terms of making their manufacturings efficient, but they're still making the bulk of their money from the number of molecules they're selling, which is in direct competition to the concept of the circular economy.
Thanks for that, Peter. And Shiv, you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I just want to add on that. I mean, what Peter is referring to is the polluter pays principle. I mean, there's two more, right? Consumers pay, taxpayer pays, polluters pay. If the government pays, it's essentially the taxpayer. If it's the polluter pays principle, then it's the extractor. And if it's the guy who's buying for it. Easier start, Sanjay, I guess a simplistic response to your question is, in the imminent short term, taxpayer pays. In the midterm, I would say the extractor pays, but in the longer term, I think the consumer has to pay. But we have to keep that load, I think, minimal and manageable for the consumer. Otherwise, we risk bringing down a lot of people below the poverty line again and lose all the gains that we've made.
Right. And I think there's a question begging to be asked when you talk about consumer paying is the bottom of pyramid, individuals, and how do we manage that at a national level? But I want to just swing now to Prof. Koh. We are trying to save nature, but it would seem to me that the reason why nature has not been given its fair position in this equation is because it has limited value. So how do we monetize nature that people will say, I want to keep nature because nature has a value to our existential existence? So is there a scheme that, I know the REDT plus tried to do something about saving the forest, how do we monetize nature and natural resources in a way that facilitates the circular and also meets the decarbonization objectives? Any thoughts around that, Prof?
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay, for that question. So you're absolutely right that nature hasn't been properly valued, or rather internalized in our valuation of many other things that we consume or produce in society. And it's not just in terms of nature in the sense of forests or biodiversity, but also in terms of the need to internalize some of the costs as well, the environmental costs of our activities, the pollution, air and water pollution, and so on. So the costs of much of our activity and our production and their impacts on the environment and nature need to be properly internalized and valued. And only then would we have a true cost of a lot of the goods and services that we consume, and value and value them properly, which would also contribute to the incentive to bring them into the circular economy.
Right. And Prof, just to follow on that question, are people working on a methodology, or is the methodology so complex that it's going to just remain a discussion point that this is the right thing to do, but we don't know how to do it? Or are we getting somewhere with regards to costing these externalities, especially with the environment?
Yeah, there are lots of, I think, different research groups working on different ways of valuing and internalizing these costs and values in different sectors and for different goods and services. So in the conservation arena, for example, a lot of the forest carbon projects, including REDD projects, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, is a good way to do that, to try to put a price on the carbon that is that is stored in these forests, and for the services that these forests are providing in terms of sequestering or removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. But on top of that, there are also many other co-benefits that these forests provide in addition to climate mitigation for us. And that includes providing livelihood opportunities for the rural communities, contributing to food security, purifying our air and water, and so on. So a proper accounting of the value of these other co-benefits provided by nature would help to put a higher price on carbon, a more accurate price, maybe I should put it that way, on carbon, and make them more cost competitive to the land rent from the other alternative land users that are competing with nature for land. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Prof. Koh. And I just got one more question, because every time you answer my previous question, it begs another question, and that is adopting these methodologies. And we know that in carbon tax, we have a range of values from $1 to $170 across the world, which suggests that every nation has decided what that taxation point is. Do you anticipate that the methodology of accounting for environmental value, right, could be done at the national level? Or is this something that everyone says, nah, we got to get another UN mandate to adopt the same calculation across the world? I mean, what's your sensing here? What's the right thing to do? I mean, can we just start as a nation in Singapore and say, we're going to have a better way of costing the true cost of our activities in relation to the environment?
Yeah, so I think we have to start somewhere, and Singapore is starting with $5 per ton carbon price, and that's expected to rapidly increase over the next couple of years to maybe 2 or 3 times, at least 2 or 3 times that amount. I think the pricing of carbon would be influenced by many factors, and one is the friction it would cause to businesses. We also don't want to stall economic development by giving a shock with a sudden increase in carbon price or carbon tax amounts. So to that extent, I think, or in that sense, I think every country would probably have to have its own approach or runway to ramping up the price of carbon. There are research that have calculated the social cost of carbon to be around $100 per ton. So that is probably the amount that we should aspire to, or close to that, over a certain period of time, for us to properly internalize the costs of our activities, of our carbon-intensive activities. Yeah.
Right. Thank you for that, Prof. Koh. And Peter, I just want to swing back to you now. And I want you to, if you could just expound a bit more on green procurement, because green procurement is going to have a ripple effect on whether goods and services qualify to exist. Because if green procurement rules dictate that your products and services must have some minimum level of green footprint, you are not going to be able to thrive in an economy that's moving in that direction. How do you see the transitioning happening with regards to green procurement in a country? Are we going to go stepwise, or are we going to go from zero to hero? And do we have all the different parts and pieces in place to ascertain and validate and verify that those goods and services are truly green?
Well, interestingly enough, Sanjay, I think it comes back to the previous comments that were just made about carbon price and how that gets calculated. We work in a global world. We work in a world where all supply chains work differently. Some of them are local supply chains, others are global and international. So my question here, and it comes back to carbon price, and you know, is to whether, in fact, there is such a thing as a single price of carbon, you know, at $100 or $15 or $10 or whatever it is, or whether you actually got to calculate this out based on some form of value chain focused basis. You know, let's take LNG, for example, you know, which is going to continue to be going for a long time. Now, Japan is already clearly stating that it wants a way to zero carbonize that LNG, right? From, you know, from their process and their economics, and they're prepared to pay for it. So that means they'll pay a price to get rid of that carbon dioxide to somewhere else as part of their green procurement philosophy, all right? So what I think every country needs to do is to look at their economics from a core value chain perspective. And what needs to do is you then need to look at the trading matrix with other countries on that basis. So in my opinion, what we will see is, yes, I think, you know, to me, coming up with a single price of carbon and, you know, an open carbon trading system is the Band-Aid. You know, that's the easy bit. Where I think it will go is actually much more value chain focused. We will have clearinghouses or some form of authority that will regulate carbon price and carbon border taxes and how interrelated trade within a particular value chain will be dealt with, that will cover not only carbon, but environmental issues as well, health issues as well. So I suspect that's where we'll probably move towards. Right. Much more of a value chain focus.
Thank you for that, Peter. I just want to swing to PS now and just address a question in the audience as well. When we look at the advent of digitalization, big data, connectivity, and all it feeds into modeling and simulation, this must be an exciting time for the circular economy, where you could actually model flows to optimize various energy and resource streams. Are you beginning to see this happening? Are people actually using those capabilities to kind of accelerate identifying opportunities that would pander to resource efficiency, aka circular economy?
I think we were seeing a lot of interest in the digital twinning solutions, but I think a lot of such solutions still reside within the company. So for example, like commercial buildings, they are now creating digital twin for the chiller systems, for the HVAC systems. Yeah, I think likewise, you also see like data centers operators also having digital twins, right, to sort of basically represent. But I think to really the use digital twin to facilitate the creation of circular economy, I think that there's a need for an aggregator of sort, right? So whether you can actually manage what kind of information can be shared, because a lot of time I think industry or companies are very sensitive about the kind of information that gets outside of the company, because then the competitor can probably reverse engineer, figure out what kind of processes, what kind of equipment they are using. So I think this is what probably the government or the regulator may be able to do this function, right? For example, like JTC, they can probably collect and desensitize some of the information. So it's then moving towards, for example, the co-location idea. So that, for example, the waste cooling resources, for example, from SLNG, can then be used for example, cooling data centers, things like that. Yeah, so I think the company alone probably will be actually quite challenging. So I think this is an area where government will be able to step in.
Right. Thank you. Thanks for that, PS. Shiv, I just want, there's a question alluding to making this sustainability more business savvy and lucrative. You paraphrase, literally quoting what the person uses on the chat group. I'm just wondering, haven't we passed that? I mean, the fact that you're saving water, you're saving energy, the fact that you're saving resources and being more efficient, isn't that a business case in itself already? What is missing? I mean, you're using less and getting more, right?
So I guess, yes, we are. I guess in the circular economy, we talk about, at least at Energy, we have the first pillar of a 3-pillar framework as performance driven. So circular economy is one that's performance driven. And a classical example I share, Sanjay, is in Netherlands, the pilot that Philips did in their lighting division before they sold it off. They actually experimented with selling lumens instead of selling bulbs. So it wasn't about energy efficiency. It was about a complete transformation of the business model. When they started selling lumens, they actually realized that, okay, now the client is paying them based on how much light they consume. Now this incentive, earlier they would sell the bulb and they're done. But this change in the business model actually incentivized them to design more modular bulbs, create systems where they could remote manage the bulbs, because now the payment structures changed. The business model and the incentive structures changed. So they began to design bulbs more efficiently. If you take Uber and in the context of the circular economy, they made hiring a ride more efficient than owning a car. It was not about designing better cars, cheaper cars, more resource efficient cars. They just disincentivized car ownership. So I guess that's what we mean in a circular economy, where we are co-opting the consumer to make the full value chain performance-based and deliver the actual need the customer wants, rather than forcing them to buy the full product. I know a big FMCG company is trialing powder-based shampoo that you can actually mix with water. It becomes liquid shampoo and then you use, because that right now you're not buying the shampoo only, you're buying and paying for the big container that holds the shampoo. So that's what we talk about when we talk about the circular economy, making the whole value chain performance driven.
Right, and Shiv, that lends into this concept of that Peter had in one of the boxes is about design, right? We need to start redesigning our products, because it does pander to the circular economy. What are your thoughts on the business opportunity to redesign all our consumer goods in a way that would reduce the virgin resources to be used to pander to our insatiable need to own and consume?
Is this a question for me, Sanjay?
Yeah, for you, man.
So back of the envelope, last year we did some studies internally. It is over a period of a decade, at least a $3 trillion opportunity.
Wow.
The opportunity to redesign, relook at everything from food production to how we move around cities, to how we use buildings, to how we use parking spaces. Everything is up for grabs, I feel. And there is an opportunity to redesign everything. Even if you're not a believer in climate change, there are some other concepts like planetary boundaries. Like in food systems, we talk about natural limits to food production. Food productivity is not increasing, agricultural productivity, but demand is going up. So regardless of whether you're a believer in climate change and carbon emissions, we are hitting natural resource limits, which makes a strong case for circular economy. There's an opportunity to redesign everything, Sanjay, a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity.
Thanks for sure. And PS, what do you think? As an innovator, this must be exciting news, right? Because if there is a business reason to relook at how we've managed our consumables and create a more circular economy type of design, that opens up the space for innovators like yourself and your colleagues to really start thinking of just not making a product, but making a product that meets the circular economy objectives.
I think certainly, yeah. So I think really a collaborative approach and a open-minded mindset needs to be there. Yeah, but once you get people to share various ideas openly, I think that's where a lot of synergy can be extracted. just to maybe go back to the SLNG thing. So recently we signed an MOU with SLNG, Savannah, Jurong, and National Supercomputing Center. So we're actually trying to recover the waste coal energy, right? Instead of for them just discharging this back to the sea, we are actually going to dig a seawater heat exchanger into the flowing seawater stream in order to sort of recover the coal energy for cooling supercomputers. So I think that, yeah. So in the past, actually, it's quite interesting. We have been to SLNG, I think in total, probably no less than 6 or 7 times. We met up with 4 management teams. But it's only the latest management that we managed to convince them to actually look into this idea. Yeah, so I think it's right, but obviously it's also a timing issue. I think now everybody has this increased awareness about sustainability. So I think really the timing is just nice.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned a very important group of decision makers, the senior management, right? And while sustainability has got its plug with the recent government announcement on the green plan, and when that everyone really now is up front and center, I'm not so sure it's true that senior management understands what circular economy is really about. Do we need to do more to educate senior management on the opportunities that the circular economy actually provides? Your thoughts, and also for Shiv, because you deal with talking to these individuals, there's more need to be done.
So maybe can I outsource this question to Lian Ting? Because Lian Ting have been sort of very keen to address this issue.
Happy to pull Lian Ting in if you have some perspective on have we done enough to educate the senior management in companies on the circular economy and opportunities?
I think well, I can't speak for the companies, but I think there is a strong demand from businesses in general in Singapore to have additional opportunities to capacity build their workforce, including their leadership. I think many of us would have encountered this observation, or have had this observation through our conversations with these business leaders. Especially in these COVID times, it's more challenging for companies to send their C-suite people or even their middle management people to training overseas, and so we are beginning to see lots of training opportunities or training programs being developed and being offered across different IHLs, universities, and NGOs and private consultancy firms in Singapore. And I think that speaks to the growing demand to capacity build businesses within businesses, not just for the green economy, not just on issues related to the green economy, but I think in sustainability in general.
Thanks for that, Lian Ting. And Shiv, you want to chime in as well?
Yeah, well, I actually don't know what the correlation is, Sanjay, but since COVID hit, I've seen this enormous consumer interest in sustainability. For the first time since I became a professional, I'm seeing the ordinary consumer ask questions about, hey, where's this product coming from? Who's paying for it? How much are they getting paid? I've never seen questions like this before ever. I think this consumer pressure is going to put pressure on businesses to adapt, because now it's a business decision to respond to consumer interest. So I think it makes the whole justification easier. The biggest fear is that in many senior leaders' minds, circular economy equals recycling.
Right.
And we have to shift them away from that mindset and get them to look at it as a fundamental redesign opportunity. Over the last decade, again, back in the energy days also, Sanjay, everyone would say, hey, if it's a greenfield project, everything is possible. Unfortunately, we've inherited legacy systems. COVID has provided that reboot. We have the opportunity to fold something new. This is the opportunity. That's all I want to say, Sanjay.
Thanks for that, Shiva. And I think, all said and done is the consumer, isn't it? if we didn't waste so much, we didn't overbuy and overconsume, and we pushed for the green agenda, we can actually drive this this change that we all need, because businesses survive on consumers, and if consumers stop buying non-green products, the businesses will begin to make that shift to make those products green. And I think it's good that we have a community now, and whether COVID was a blessing or not, but I think that mindset shift is key across the board, because that's where the buying pressure is from, that will make businesses more profitable if they are able to adopt these practices with respect to green economy and a circular economy, which would eventually lend to resource efficiency.
Sanjay, can I just add one thing, as well as looking at business, and I think this is coming back to Shiva's point, and, his point about this being a multi-billion-dollar opportunity.
Trillion.
Or trillion-dollar opportunity, or $1 trillion opportunity, whichever way you look at it, is there's also a massive regional opportunity here, okay? And to my mind, we shouldn't forget that as well. I mean, we all know the region doesn't work very well together in the past, but this is potentially massive upside if the region can get sorted out, against the rest of the world. So I think it's very important that we stress this as well. So this is not only to our businesses, but also to our politicians.
Right.
This opportunity is not only something we need to look at from an inward-looking economic perspective, but very much from an outward-looking regional perspective, because things like carbon capture and storage, things like the hydrogen economy, things like many of the other areas where we reuse virgin materials in a different way, will require regional supply chains to make them economic. And almost by definition, regionality will also be very, very important in this whole jigsaw puzzle.
Thank you for that, Peter. And we are running out of time, and I think I want to start to wrap up. And I apologize if we didn't get to all your questions, but I tried to address them in some way or another. So maybe last words for the audience who hung on, and thank you for hanging on for those who did. From Shiv, with regards to the circular economy, what would your message be to the audience?
This is an opportunity to get both incremental as well as exponential gains in the circular economy. The time is now. Let's transform this COVID crisis into an opportunity and redesign every damn thing out there.
Prof. Koh?
Yeah, thanks for that. So maybe my last word is coming from my bias as an ecologist. I think the circular economy that we're talking about now is an excellent example of biomimicry, because nature is the one that sort of invented circular economy in a different sense, in terms of many processes being circular. So in that sense, we should look to nature for many of the solutions to our current environmental and climate problems.
Thanks, Prof. Koh. PS, Prof. Lee?
Okay. I will think that circularity requires a more encompassing and general equilibrium way of thinking than we typically apply at the moment. So I'd like to add the reimagine to redesign.
Thank you. And Peter, your last parting shots.
Yeah, well, as I say, I hope we've made a point to say that the circular economy is a lot more than recycling to start with. So that's the first point. But I would also say that it's important to recognize that the extraction and processing of natural resources, so this is not just hydrocarbons, this is not just oil, gas, and coal, but minerals and metals as well, make up over half of our global greenhouse gas emissions, while contributing to more than 90% of global biodiversity loss. So my view is that that's where we need to start. We need to focus heavily on finding ways of improving resource efficiency. And that should be the core focus of where we certainly kick off the circular economy and how we move forwards.
Thanks for that, Peter. From my side, thank you very much, SEAS and the SEAS Secretariat for pulling this together. Kavita, back to you to any administrative wrap-ups or watch outs or next exciting things SEAS is going to bring forward.
Thank you so much, Sanjay, and all our speakers today. This was truly a very exciting conversation. We had most of our participants there right till the end. So a big thank you to all of you. Our next big event is in a month's time, which is the Asia Clean Energy Summit. Right on cue, I think we have a slide there. So I look forward to seeing many of you come to that, and we'll be doing it in person. And you're more than welcome if you're in Singapore to attend it in person. So big thank you to everybody. And I think my colleagues have put up a poll there, which helps us to improve our events, bring you what you need. So do fill that out. And thank you, Sanjay. Thank you very much for hosting this for us today.